everyone. So I think you all know me already, but for the purpose of the recording, I'm Katie Hastings, and I'm the Wales coordinator for the Seed Sovereignty Programme. And obviously we've been going through these sessions for nearly a year now. So I've seen you all in previous sessions. And so this is the 10th session of our intermediate seed production course. And earlier in the program, we've talked loads about the practicalities of seed production, and you've had loads of amazing sessions with the Heritage Seed Library on kind of all the practical considerations with seed production. So for these last few sessions, we're going to focus more on less of the practicalities and on what to do with your seed and ethics and seed justice over the next few sessions. But today we're focusing on routes to market for seed. So earlier in the program, we've talked about the importance of saving seed on farm for your own use and how that can be really beneficial. And also we've talked about swapping seeds, seed circles, the importance of ensuring that we keep preserving genetic diversity. So all of those reasons why seed production is really important. But today we're going to focus on how growing a seed crop could potentially bring an income stream to your farm and could potentially be a product that you can be selling. So we're going to talk about growing seed for contract for a seed company, and then we're going to talk about selling seed direct. So that's what the two things we're going to focus on today. So we've got two people joining us to talk about those things. We've got Dave from Little Bishops Organics, who's going to talk about being contracted to grow seed for a seed company and the pros and cons around that and how that works for him as a market gardener. And then we'll do questions about contract seed growing. And then Sue and I will talk about our experiences learning to sell seed direct through the Wales Seed Hub. And so all the things that you would need to consider if you want to sell seed direct to customers, not through a contract with someone else. So that is, what we're going to focus on. And I think we'll just kind of dive straight in and hear from Dave about growing seed for contract. So I'll pass to you, Dave.
Oh, thanks very much, Katie. Hi, my name is David Parry. I'm from Little Bishops Organics. I work alongside Chloe Blackmore, and we've been running for just a little bit over a year. And I've got a little bit of a presentation for you. Here we go. So here's our funky little logo. And this is our field. So we've got we're cultivating currently 2 acres down in South Devon and Kentisbeere, which is near sort of Columpton, the biggest town. And we've got 2 polytunnels that are 22 meters by 7.5 meters. And we've also got a small propagation tunnel. So I thought I'd just show you, a few pictures showing the scale that we're working at to give you an idea of when I'm talking about sort of pros and cons and stuff, the kind of the context that I'm talking within. So we set up mainly as a veg box scheme. And that was our main focus from the project. And we've been doing veg boxes for a little over a year now. And we went into a community supported agriculture scheme model in July of this year. And so far, so good. We also sell some stuff at the Columpton Farmers Market, which is every other weekend on a Saturday. So here's just a picture of our small propagation tunnel setup, and that is it. Along that side, the further end, there's a heated prop bench, and then we've got unheated bench where Chloe's just moving trays around, and a hardening off area. And we do, sort of 90% of the propagation ourselves. And I thought I'd just show you a few pictures of one of the crops we saved commercially this year. Again, just to kind of give you an idea of what it actually looks like. And then I'll go into some of the pros and cons, how we found it. So we grew red solix lettuce for vital seeds. And this is them getting started off, and then we transplanted them out. And then once they got to about this size and they were looking really lush, we did a selection on them and picked I think it was the 50 best looking ones, and transplanted them indoors into one of our polytunnels, and then let it go to seed. And so this was their kind of final place. And we set up a frame. And just last week, we handed over the seed to Vital Seeds. So that was really nice to actually, pass on the seed and actually have it happen, which is pretty cool. So now you can look at my ugly mug for a while. So I mentioned Vital Seeds, and they're the company we've been working for. They're based really close by to us. We've known Fred and Ronya sort of pre-Vital Seeds. So it was a kind of a no-brainer to us that they were the company that we wanted to work with. To say like how we decided to grow what we've grown for seed, we made a plan last year of everything we were growing for the box scheme for the CSA, and we made our plans and our cropping plans and plans for field space and polytunnel space. And it was there that we found like, okay, we've got like half a bed here that is free and half a bed here that's free. Like, what can we do with that? And so we chose 4 crops. We chose red solix lettuce, yellow submarine tomatoes, cosmos flowers, and climbing borlotti beans. We'd had experience growing cosmos and tomatoes and borlotti beans before. We hadn't had experience of saving lettuce seed before. Oh no, that's a lie. I've done it once, but not like to a big scale. So yeah, these all 4 of these kind of fitted within our cropping plan quite well. And it seemed like a sort of manageable amount to start with, just like 4 crops. And yeah, they were really, perhaps to say, they were really in our plan. Like we knew where they were going to be in the field or in the polytunnel. We'd timelined it out. So it wasn't one of those things where it was like, oh, we also need to do this seed crop. It was like, this is a crop, just kind of like we're treating any other crop that we're working with. And yeah, maybe just to run down. So with that red solix that you saw, we've ended up harvesting just about 1 kilo of seed just from that space. And Vital Seeds will be paying us, they have like an unclean and a clean price. And we got our seed like fairly clean. So we're looking to be making just over £500 from that crop. From the yellow submarine tomatoes, they were also on a similar length bed that you saw to the lettuce. And we got 55 grams of seed from that crop. And so that will get us around £300. The cosmos flowers, we've yielded 750 grams, and that'll get us around just over £500. And the climbing borlottis are yet to be harvested. But perhaps, yeah, just to show you from that, we're looking at, over £1,000, possibly £1,500 in income, which is useful to say the least. And that's just from 4 crops that we're working with. Yeah, I think maybe just to talk a bit about contract growing, actually, the contract itself. So Vital Seeds are still, sort of relatively new. So when we actually started to agree for growing these seed crops, the contract was being made like as we were doing the work, and we ended up, being given a contract. But it was all very kind of open and understanding, and with them being growers as well, you know, you're not going to get to a point where it's like, oh, you're not providing us with seeds, so we're going to sue you. It's all very like encouraging, and you know that fundamentally, if you don't get to a point where you have your seed, all that's going to happen is you're not going to get money for that crop, just like any other crop, really. So yeah, perhaps I'll just go through the kind of pros and cons that we've found. So I'll start with some of the advantages. Firstly, like I said, it's like a possibly quite a lucrative additional revenue stream. So there's only so much veg we can sell to our veg boxes, and we're fortunate enough that we do have more land than we need at the moment. So we've got that opportunity to potentially grow more seed crops in the future if we want. Support from the seed company. So yeah, from our experience, I'm just talking about working with Vital Seeds. Like I haven't worked with any of the others, but you know, I've met the guys from Real Seeds. I've met guys from the Seed Co-op, and I imagine, like, judging from who they are, they would also be really supportive, especially if you're like a first-time seed grower for them. Yeah, like Vital Seeds have helped us along the way. One thing, I think I'll just share my screen again because I've got one thing that they did send us. Oh, let me just make sure it's on the right thing. Let's try that. So can you all see that? It's like an Excel document. Yeah. So this is a document that Vital Seeds sent to us. And part of it is for us to fill in information into. But if we just have a look along this first line, the sort of the red Solix lettuce. So yeah, with each crop, we spoke with them about how we would grow the crop and what's best to do. So the idea of making the selection and the amount of plants to start with and end up with, that was Vital Seed's suggestion, and they provided us with the seed. As part of this spreadsheet, you can see there's sowing recommendations, growing instructions, seed harvesting instructions. So it's not like you're, at least from our experience, we're not just being told, okay, grow a seed crop. There's a lot of information given by Vital Seeds as to what they're looking for. And then they've got various tabs down the bottom for us to fill in when we sowed it, planting, transplanting, if we saw any pests or diseases along the way. So basically a massive pro has been their support all the way through the process. Also, we found it utilizes polytunnel space during the summer months, because sometimes you get in your cropping plans, you might have an early crop that goes in and then comes out quite early, and you actually, for us, we are then starting to look towards winter brassicas for salad, peas, beans, and carrots. But with some of them, there is a bulk of time where there's not actually anything to go in the polytunnel in the summer. So having a seed crop that's gone to seed and can be dried inside is a really useful potential crop to have. It's also a really good learning opportunity. It's been a push to learn, especially with the red Solix lettuce, actually us deciding like, okay, no, we're actually going to do this, rather than just kind of go, oh, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, or maybe we'll just do a few plants. And combined with the support from the seed company, you learn so fast, and it's like anything. Once you sort of put yourself into a position where you need to know something, you're going to do the research, and you are going to be slightly more observant. Yes, that's that. Yeah, a massive pro is that you're working towards a more resilient food system, which is wicked, and everyone should be doing that. So yeah, if you decide not to, then you're an idiot, aren't you? Another pro is that there's not much competition at the moment for a lot of crops. Like we effectively had our choice of crops to grow seed for. You know, there's not a lot of people like breaking down the door saying like, oh no, take my seed, oh no, take my seed. So there is a lot of scope for seed saving in our country for sure. So I just go through some of the cons. So yeah, one thing within seed saving, with some seeds anyway, is the length of time the process is. There's various things that can affect. So for example, if you need bed space in your polytunnel at a certain time, but your seeds haven't quite dried, and then you start to like, oh, do we have to sacrifice the seed crop, or do we wait a little bit longer to put this next crop in, but then that might be too late. There's also issues with pests as well. You know, if a crop's in and out, there's less time for pests and disease to get in there. Like we've had a bit of a red spider mite problem on our climbing borlotti beans, and the amount they've actually hit us has been quite impressive. The speed that they take over. We've had sort of 2 beds in our polytunnel that have been separated, and thankfully one has been untouched, and it's just part of the other one that's been touched. So yeah, we will lose some seed crop, but hopefully not too much. Yeah, I think that there's also an issue, say if you have something going to seed that is easily crossed with a number of other crops. It might mean you're then forced to not grow a certain crop one year, or either that, or you've just got a lot of faff with kind of isolating and covering or that sort of thing. So yeah, before you decide on a crop, yeah, just sort of think about what else you're growing and the full implications of will that get in the way of something, will that cross. I guess, yeah, also, I mean, yeah, just thinking about what actually just grows wild around you as well, because especially if you're thinking about something like umbilifers, like carrots, for example, yeah, you might get in trouble there with the cross. Yeah, so briefly, that's my sort of summary of pros and cons for contract growing. I hope that's been useful. So shall I pass it back for questions?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's really good to hear that. And I was actually going to dive straight in with a question myself, and then other people, you can raise your hand on camera or type into the chat. But I was wondering if you could say more about the finances, because one thing that always comes up for us is this question of, on the face of it, growing a seed crop, you earn a lot more than you would growing that same thing as a vegetable crop, so you get paid more for it as seed than you do as a vegetable crop. But yeah. I mean, you already touched on it already, but then it's like there's all the extra time involved and the extra space and the extra, like, perhaps need for processing. Like, do you feel that it's worth the extra money, kind of the amount of work that you put into a seed crop?
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, at the moment, yeah. Especially with taking the red Solix lettuce as an example, we were able to winnow it, and yeah, I guess like it's partly it's a time thing, like a labor thing, like in everything that we've been doing so far, we're putting a lot of our own time in, which we don't necessarily pay ourselves for all of that time. I think that's something that growers, you know, often have to deal with. But saying that, I do feel like if we're going to get something like, yeah, just over 500 quid for the red solix lettuce. I feel like with the labor that we put in, I think that more than covers it. And we didn't use anything particularly, what's the word, sort of fancy in the processing. It was just, you know, a bucket to shake the first set of papaces out, and then yeah, made like just a sort of A4 seed sieve, and that was it. So for us, for what we've grown this year, I think it's definitely been worth our while, for sure. I think, yeah, it might be different when you get to other crops where you might perhaps get, you might need to grow like a lot more quantity to actually get any amount of payment. Perhaps just to say, with the yellow submarine tomatoes, there was an issue on having to do an acid treatment on them. We were just going to be fermenting them and then cleaning them off, but then we had to do this acid treatment, which Chloe did, and she had to do that a few times for a few different batches of seeds. But the main thing was just leaving the seeds in running water for about an hour or so. But she was able to do that. Like the where we live is on site at the farm, so doing some of this processing is kind of manageable. So she was able to do that fairly easily, you know, just sort of whilst doing other things. So whilst it was a bit more finicky, again, I think the money we got back for it, I think covers it.
Nice. Jeff, you've got your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, David, if you would go a little bit more into that double kind of transplant process, because I just sowed straight into modules in early March, and then planted straight into the tunnel, and 70 plants into the tunnel with the expectation of winding up with 20 or 25, which I did in the end. But was that a foolish thing to do, or should I have planted them outside and then dug them up and transplanted them? For me, going into a tunnel, that's going to put them into stress, and they're going to bolt a lot sooner than they would if they'd been in the ground.
Yeah. So it was partly a sort of a guideline from Vital Seeds. They kind of suggested that as a way to do it. I think it also helped us in terms of utilizing polytunnel space. So when they're first planted outside, I guess one thing on that, we like planting them outside shows you once they get to a size that you want them to be if you were harvesting for a crop. If you're growing them outside, you can see how they're performing outside, because that will be what they eventually get used for. So then the transplanting thing, we dug up quite a root ball with each transplant to kind of prevent any stress. For sure that there is going to be, I can't really deny that, but yeah, it seemed like Vital Seeds were quite happy with that as an approach. And maybe because you've grown it to such a size that you're happy with and it's happy, if you're then taking it in, if it does get a little bit stressed, perhaps that's maybe not the end of the world, because it should hopefully still give a seed that will grow something that outside gets to a nice quality.
Yeah, that's
the question from Lisa. Sorry, does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, that's really interesting. But it for me, I wouldn't have worked because I haven't got the outside space to start off with. I've only got a half a bed inside a tunnel. So I have to lose everything from that, and it was the only way I could think of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just yeah, from our experience, like we do have a bit of land outside, so that's perhaps another reason why we would have done
Yeah.
it like
Yeah.
that. Mm.
Thanks a lot.
So Lisa's asking in the chat, how many plants of each crop did you plant for those figures? So I think she probably means the financial figures.
Yeah, yes. So with the red Solix lettuce, I think we had it was 60. Oh, that ended up being 57. So that was 57 lettuce plants. I suppose to add to most of these crops, for example, with the lettuce, the lettuces that we didn't choose, so we chose some, brought them in. The lettuces we didn't choose, we were still harvesting, we were still utilizing. So it wasn't, to us, that wasn't wasted crop. That was, we used those as well. And for the yellow submarine tomatoes, we had 47 plants, and we chose the best 30 to harvest from. Some, yeah, like with some tomatoes, you do get those little ones where there hasn't been pollination. And again, we were able to use those and sell them at the market, or eat them ourselves. So yeah, that was the lettuce, tomatoes. The cosmos, we outside in our beds, we've just got 50-meter long beds, and they're in blocks of 20. So we've got 80 beds outside being cultivated, and the cosmos flowers just ran the length of one bed. So off the top of my head, I can't remember how many plants that is, but if you imagine, yeah, they grow quite big, and we grew one every meter or so maybe like 50 plants, something like that. And then borlottis, we grew, so it was the same, it was 2 10-meter long beds, and again, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but if you imagine it's that amount of space utilized for the borlottis.
Great. One thing that struck me as like huge benefits to being contracted to grow seed rather than like selling it yourself is that you were saying you didn't really have to choose, you didn't have to make much choices on the varieties, did you? So like you could pick and choose what crops you might want to grow because they would fit with your market garden, but then Vital Seeds obviously provided you with the starter seed and the varieties that they wanted you to grow, so you didn't have to make that decision. And I guess we're going to talk more with the Wales Seed Hub about the kind of problems actually of like finding new varieties to sell, but you didn't have to deal with that, and you also don't have to deal with the legalities either, because Vital Seeds are taking all of that on, like in terms of like being registered seed sellers and whether the varieties are legal to sell or not. So that seems like a huge benefit. I was just wondering about packing. You said that you had to provide clean seed. Kind of to what standard? Can you say more about that? And I'm presuming that Vital Seeds pack them into packets for you.
Yeah, that's right. So for example, with the lettuce, we were able to get it to a sort of fairly clean wind winnowed state, and that means effectively there's still like a few little bits of chaff in there, but like mainly it's clean. And I asked Fred, actually, like I sent him a video and just sort of showed him the seed in the bucket, and I said, like, do you want us to clean this anymore? And he was like, oh no, it's okay, we got like a fancy thing that will do the final bit. So that was a relief and quite useful. The tomato seeds, I guess, like, we get them as clean as possible. You sort of, with the acid treatment, or the fermenting treatment, if you're allowed to do that, it gets the seeds to a very clean state anyway. The Cosmos seed, again, we wind winnowed it and we got it to a fairly clean state, and it was similar with the lettuce. Like, there was still some bits of chaff in there, but Fred said, like, yeah, that's fine, like, send it our way. And the borlotti beans, we're yet to process, but we've grown borlotti beans in the past, and we know we can get them to pretty much totally sort of clean and dried.
Nice. Okay, so we're at 12:30, so there might be time for like one more question if anyone wants to ask a final question of Dave. Go on, Tilly.
Hi. The borlotti seed, are you cleaning it? How are you cleaning it? Do you have any specific machinery, or have you worked out kind of a hand process that doesn't involve buying any equipment?
Yeah, we're gonna try it by hand. This is the largest amount of beans that we're going to be cleaning. Last year we grew some for drying for our veg boxes, and yeah, that was just bucket sieves, not much else, nothing very fancy, and that we were able to get enough beans there for yeah, at the time we were just doing like 25, 26 veg boxes, and then a bit for the market. So we're happy that we're going to give that another go, and hopefully that'll work for us.
Great. And so you were just kind of smashing the beans, the pods, and that's all you needed really, just put in a pillowcase and bash it around.
That's it. Yeah. Sort of fairly like unsophisticated, but it works. And yeah, you know, just a bit of sort of manual work just gets it done.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And also, I wondered if you were finding that it was viable growing beans for market and growing drying beans just as a food for the market and veg boxes. I know that's slightly unrelated.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll just quickly say, we find it really useful because we use them during the hungry gap. So when we don't have a lot going in our veg boxes, dried beans are a really useful one because you can just sit on them and wait until you need to use them if you've got a gap. And yeah, like we feel like we charged what we needed to get money back on them. So yeah.
Great news. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. All right, that's really interesting. I guess so. You're growing for Vital Seeds, obviously, and I'll just do a shout out that there are other small seed companies in the UK, Real Seeds and Seed Cooperative, who often look to contract growers. We've had people go through our training before and we've linked them with Real Seeds to be contract growers, but at the moment they've put a pause on that just because they've taken quite a lot of new growers on, and they find that like there's quite a lot of work with communicating with the new growers and like helping them through becoming seed contractors. So Real Seeds have currently paused on taking on new contractors, but they probably will be looking for more people again in the future. Seed Cooperative potentially are, Vital Seeds potentially are, and we have also been contacted by some bigger seed companies who are looking to have more seed produced in the UK, and they're looking at like bigger quantities, so you'd have to be kind of producing on quite a scale. But I think like there are quite a lot of opportunities for growing seed under contract in the UK. So yeah, that was really interesting. We're now going to talk about selling seed through the Wales Seed Hub, which Sue and I have been involved in, and we're kind of using this as an example so that we can talk about all the issues that come up with selling seed direct. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see that? All right, great. Sue's mostly going to do this bit, but I'll just introduce that. As I said, Sue and I are part of the Wales Seed Hub, and the Wales Seed Hub is basically a cooperative of growers who are working together to sell seed. So this is something that I've been supporting through my job with the Seed Sovereignty Programme, and a lot of the people that are involved in the Wales Seed Hub have been through our year-long training before in past years. And the idea is that the producers are growing seed on several different farms, so they're all producing seed like on their own farms, but then they're coming together to sell them collectively through this Seed Hub. And basically what the Seed Hub is it's an online space where the seed can all be bought from one place and distributed from one place, but also the growers within the seed hub, they're kind of working together on like marketing and registering as seed sellers and packaging and all the things that are required to kind of get the seed like from the fields actually into the customer's hands. So this is quite a new thing. We only started the Wales Seed Hub in 2019. We only started selling seed last year, although Sue was actually saying it's technically this year because we didn't actually open the shop until the new year. And we've only sold 2 varieties so far because we're completely new. So last season we sold our first 2 varieties, and then this season we're currently in the process of like harvesting quite a lot more crops, and we'll have like hopefully a lot more varieties for sale like within the next month or so. So yeah, we're just using our experiences with the Wales Seed Hub like to tell you about what's come up with direct sales, and they can obviously be applied to your own farms or your own businesses. And another disclaimer is we are absolutely not experts, because we've been totally learning this as we go along, and actually Real Seeds have been supporting us with the process. We've had some advice from Vital Seeds, so we've kind of been learning every step as we've gone, and so we're going to share those experiences with you. And all the seed that the Wales Seed Hub is producing is open pollinated seed and is agroecologically produced. Yeah, I'll pass to Sue.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me all right, or do I need to turn off my video for my poor internet? You can hear? Okay,
Fine.
good. Okay. So yeah, so as Katie said, the Welsh Seed Hub, we've just fought our way through all the form filling and regulations involved in getting a license to sell seed. But I think actually we're a worst case scenario, because more usually it would just be one farm or one person setting up on their own to form a seed company. We weren't actually sure how, or even if, you know, the regulatory structure would cope with a cooperative of growers, but so far so good. So our first step was to apply to AFA for a license for seed marketing. There's a lot of acronyms in this game. AFA is the Animal and Plant Health Agency. So we had to apply for a license for seed marketing operations. You have to give a brief description of your business and whether you're just marketing seed, repacking other people's seed, or actually producing and cleaning seed yourself, and what type of seed you're dealing with. You have to remember that the majority of what we think of as seed companies, certainly the garden seed companies, just buy in seed from the wholesale market and repackage them. So they're just applying for a license to basically repackage seed. Anyway, so you can fill in the form online. It's not a long form, it's slightly scary. Katie filled it in. It's scary because there's a lot of kind of seed industry terms, and I think the main one you'll come across is certified seed, which applies mostly to agricultural crops. So you don't need to worry about that. What you'll be growing and marketing is just standard seed. And you have to have a contact who has sufficient knowledge and authority to ensure that all the requirements of the seed regulations are adequately carried out. So for us, we were lucky enough to have the support of Gaia. So we used Katie's Gaia office as our address, and she was willing to sign the form. So that's great. The next slide then, please, Katie.
Yeah, and in terms of me signing the form, that is because well, the way that the Wales Seed Hub works is because it's a cooperative. We decided that we'd nominate a different secretary every year or so, and they would be the named contact for AFA. But we did explain to AFA that named contact is kind of representing a whole co-op of growers. So theoretically, all the responsibility shouldn't be on that secretary. But yeah, someone has to put their name to it. Yeah.
So once the form has been sent in, we got a call from the PHSI, that's the Plant Health and Seed Inspectorate. So they were just checking details of what we were doing. And then following that, we got an email with our license and our all-important license number. And I think this actually took about 6 months. So that's something to bear in mind, but this was at the height of the pandemic. So I don't know whether that had any effect at all. so the emails and the license and everything tell you in lots and lots of places to check the seed marketing regulations, which obviously you need to do. Is that
Yeah.
what's this about a fee? Did we have to pay a fee?
Yeah, so that we haven't actually had an inspection because of the pandemic. The Wales Seed Hub haven't had an inspection, but what they said was when you have an inspection, you actually have to pay a fee for that inspection, and all the details are on the government website. And the main thing that the inspection wants to see is your records. So we're a seed cooperative, various different people growing seed, but the important thing is that all of that seed is recorded properly, which Sue will talk about in a minute, but that is all stored in one place so that some inspector can come and can look at the records. And what he was basically saying to me is the more ordered your records are, the quicker the inspection will take. And they charge by the 15 minutes for the inspection. So it's basically an incentive to have all of your records completely in order. But we haven't been inspected yet.
Okay, so if you're thinking of selling seed, then you probably already have an idea of what types of crops and varieties you want to sell. The Welsh Seed Hub wanted to concentrate on varieties that grow well in Wales and perhaps aren't readily available elsewhere. So that was our USP, if you like. But there's seed companies, small seed companies such as Beans and Herbs that specialize in particular species. Seaspring Seeds specialize in chilies. But Medwin's of Anglesey kind of specializes in crops, in varieties that are good for growing for show. So that there's all sorts of themes, if you like, that you might have. But as Katie said, there might be ethics involved in this, perhaps in commercializing what has previously been a communally owned heritage variety. But I think, is the next session going to cover this? Katie, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about kind of ethics around, seed next session.
Because this was certainly a consideration for the heritage, for the Welsh Seed Hub, because we're starting to sell some heritage seed library varieties. And but then again, a couple of the varieties I think we're selling this year actually were collected from Wales by the Dyfi Valley Seed Savers a few years ago. So next slide then, Katie, thanks. So when you've decided, think you know what varieties you want to sell, the first thing that the regulations say that you must do is check that they're on the national list. So I'm sure you come across this beast called the national list before in the course. But it's a list of varieties that it's legal to sell because they've been through what is called a DUS check, another acronym, which means they make sure it's distinct from uniform and stable. So that's distinct plants. The variety is distinct from other varieties on the list. The plants are relatively uniform, and the variety is stable from generation to generation. And getting a DUS test done is very expensive, one thing, and another thing, some of the heritage varieties wouldn't be likely to pass it. And then that's the national list, which I'm sure this has been covered before, but the national list has been the cause of much loss of diversity in vegetable varieties, I mean, particularly when it was set up in the 1970s. However, all is not lost because some species don't need to be included on the list, and it's not at all logical. For example, peppers no peppers appear on the national list, so you don't have to register pepper varieties. If you're growing a variety of a species that should be registered, then there is the possibility of registering it as an amateur variety. And this is what we did last year with the heritage variety Q Blue, French bean, climbing French bean Q Blue, which was from the Heritage Seed Library. And Gaia found it still costs £100, but I think it would cost quite a few thousand to register it properly with a DUS test. So Gaia actually supported us financially to go through the process of registering Q Blue French bean. And instead of sending seed away for the DUS test, we had to grow it during a growing season. We had to fill in a form, a descriptive form describing its characteristics. And I'm not sure what happened. I mean, did we get a letter or an email, Katie, or?
Yeah, we had a confirmation that we'd registered it as an amateur variety. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it should appear on the list on that the website that I've given there. But it still costs £100, so that's it. So technically, if you sell unregistered varieties, it's technically illegal. But you will find that most garden seed companies, even the large ones, have them in their catalogues. And actually, DEFRA kind of say they're turning a blind eye to varieties that are sold just to amateur gardeners, but they won't put it in writing. So they certainly haven't got the resources to enforce the national list legislation in the garden market. There must be hundreds of unregistered varieties now being sold. But the hope is that, so now, after we've left the EU, in theory, all the seed legislation was carried over, but it's now being changed. It's in the process of being revised as UK seed legislation. And the hope is that with this revision, the seed marketing laws will, the kind of blind eye will become official. So so that's the position. And I think the Welsh Seed Hub are going to sell unregistered varieties this year. Is that anything to add, Katie, to that? No. Okay, next slide then, please. Okay, so if you thought you were getting there with all this form filling, you're not, because some crop species also need a plant passport. So these are a way for DEFRA to protect plant health and also to make plants and seeds traceable when they are moved around. And that's not just abroad, they apply even if you're just selling seed within the UK. But for seeds, plant passports are required just for certain species. That list on the right: onions and shallots, leeks, peppers, runner beans, French beans, broad beans, peas and tomatoes. And you'll notice that some of those are probably the most likely crops that you're going to start growing. Peas, very easy; tomatoes, very easy; French beans. So unfortunately, they're the very crops that as a kind of beginner seed saver, you're probably likely to want to grow. But once you have your seed marketing license, you can also apply to issue your own plant passports. So Welsh Seed Hub did this, and you can see that the passport that we've put on the right there, you can see the passport that we've put on the Q Blue climbing French beans. So it's just a series and letters and numbers which give the origin of the seed, and most all allow it to be traceable.
And this does all sound quite overwhelming, but we were new to it last year, and it is essentially, you fill out a form, you read the guidelines, you print out the passports, you stick them on. So it's not as overwhelming as it might sound.
Okay, so yeah, so the species, it's that list of species because these are the ones that are subject to certain pests and diseases that have the potential to be very damaging to commercial crops. DEFRA call them regulated pests and diseases. Can we have I think I've got an example, Katie. Next. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is an example of a new virus, or it's new to the UK. So it's potentially very damaging to commercial tomato crops. Tomato brown rugose virus, yeah. So under the plant passport regulations, tomatoes grown for seed need a growing season inspection. So in theory, the plant health inspector should come and inspect that crop to make sure it's disease free, and that will cost you. Or you could get the seed tested, and that will probably cost you even more. So that's bad news, really. But in practice, it seems that for seed just sold to amateur gardeners, an inspection might not happen in Wales anyway. So because there's little commercial seed growing or large scale tomato growing. But I suspect that's why Vital Seed suddenly told you to acid clean your tomato seed. David, yeah. So even though you might not get an inspection and you don't have to send your seed away, it's very important to be very aware of the regulated pests and diseases and do your own inspections and make doubly sure that you keep these records of these crops. Yeah, okay, next slide. So the records are important anyway for all the crops, to check on and record their health, and also to make sure that the plants are true to type. So this is an example of the sort of data that Welsh Seed Hub collect. It's recorded on a spreadsheet for each variety, and as Katie said, we keep it in a shared folder online. So it's probably basically like the one the Vital Seeds asks you to fill in, Dave. We have to record the number of plants grown and the isolation distance, and whereas Vital Seeds will tell you what isolation distance they expect, like I noticed it said for lettuce that you just had to avoid physical mixing of seed. So one of the things we did last year with the Welsh Seed Hub was actually have documents for each of these things, which we agreed on plant populations and isolation distances. And if you're going to belong to the Welsh Seed Hub, grow for the Welsh Seed Hub, then you undertake to adhere to these documents. It also has dates for harvesting. So if you harvest at several different dates, you should keep the batches separate and label them. Certainly if you've done germination tests. I don't know, you didn't mention germination tests, Dave. So are Vital Seeds doing the germination tests, or are you?
Yeah, Vital Seeds are going to be doing the germination tests. So yeah.
Okay. Next slide then, Katie. Yeah, so I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, you got to keep records, but it can be very, very difficult in the middle of the growing season when you're full on just kind of growing and watering and harvesting and weeding. And but what we found, I'm helping a trainee grower at Cultivate grow a tomato seed crop. What we found was she just takes photographs all the time, and I try and fill in the record sheet. And if there's a gap, then it helps to fill in any gaps. And also you've actually got a record if you're inspecting that the crops are healthy. So next slide, please. So once you've harvested the seed, you have to clean them. So I know that this is probably for some seeds quite a big thing, whereas a seed company might normally clean them for you. So we've only been growing things that are relatively easy to clean so far. So I think it's something we might have to think about for the hub. But then you have to do germination tests. I know Katrina talked about this last week or last time or the time before. And the Welsh Seed Hub have got guidance on it, on the temperatures and how long you should leave things before you count them. So you test each batch separately, record the results, and again, take a photograph. And the idea of testing the batches separately is that a batch of beans, say, harvested a month later or a couple of weeks later, when the weather has deteriorated, might have a poorer germination test, but the earlier batches are good. So then you can choose whether to mix them or not to get an average germination rate. So there are legal standards for the germination rates of vegetable seeds that are sold And I think it's about 80% for most species, although something like parsnips is lower. I actually think there's probably no legal minimum for parsnip seed. It's something very weird anyway. But in general, I mean, that's almost beside the point, because in general, seed companies aim for much higher rates than this. And we certainly are for the Welsh Seed Hub, probably over 90% for most species. I don't know whether Vital Seeds have actually outlined any criteria for lettuce seeds or any of the seeds that you're growing.
I think they have. I couldn't tell you what percentage it is, but okay. I think they have set out one.
Okay. Okay, next slide, Katie. Okay. So having grown your seed, tested it to meet all the legal requirements, then you have to packet it. So you won't be surprised to know by this time that the type of packet and what goes onto it are also subject to a whole lot of rules. You have to have packets that are tamper-proof. So those kind of press seal envelopes, press seal polythene packets wouldn't do unless you can heat seal them. And you have to put on the information that's listed here, the crop species and the variety, the seed company name and address and license number, which is Katie's office in our case. Most important, the seed lot, so the seed in the packet can be traceable, and whether it's standard seed, or whether it's listed as an amateur variety, and the year the seed was packed. And of course, the plant's passport, if it needs one, we chose to put ours on a label on the back of the packet. So if you're having packets printed, you have to bear in mind that they won't know that some of that information is going to change from year to year, your plant passport and your packing date. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, so there's other information you might want to add, the variety description, maybe some growing information. I mean, we've chosen not to put much growing information on the packet because it gives it on the website, which I think is the case with real seeds as well. And the origin of the variety or credit, which is very important to us because you see that Melbourne's Mini, which we hope to be selling this year, was sent into Dovey Valley Seed Savers by Sid Melbourne from Pengos near Macuncliffe. That's very important to acknowledge him. Ditto the varieties that we got from the Heritage Seed Library. And you don't legally have to give the number of seeds in the packet, but I think that's useful. I mean, I always find that useful when I'm buying seeds, so I would always recommend that. So if you're selling seeds in a shop or on a market store, then obviously the look of the packet is important. And I mean, a colour picture of the variety would probably be ideal, but that would be very expensive. So it's a bit of a balancing act. But if you're only selling online, then the packet isn't so important. Next slide, Katie. Okay. Oh, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so in terms of where the Wales Seed Hub sells seeds, our original plan was we're actually going to sell them in person at events and through our different farm networks. But then the pandemic came, so we basically moved all our sales online. And this often also brings obviously added administration because you've got to run a website and take payments and orders and post them all out, but it's actually quite good for reaching like quite a broad range of people. So we went with the Open Food Network, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It's software that growers and food producers can use to sell their produce. It's open source and it's a social enterprise, so they don't make a profit from us selling our produce. One good function with the Open Food Network is that multiple producers can list their produce on one shop. So you could have one seed shop and you could have multiple seed producers listing their different seed crops all in that one shop. And they also offer support to people using their platform. So this is what we chose to use, and it's actually free to use if you're taking under £500 a month of sales, and then above that they take a percentage to cover costs, which is completely fair enough. The way this worked really well for the Wales Seed Hub is we had and it was only 2 varieties last year, but we had our 2 varieties on the shop. You know, theoretically we could have loads more, we could have 50, 60 varieties on there, and all the orders come to one central account. So even if the seeds coming from different growers, it just helps you to kind of streamline that ordering process, take all the payments centrally, and then work out the distribution afterwards. But also to say that obviously the Open Food Network are not the only selling platform. There's loads of selling platforms out there that you could use, like, you know, Wix, Shopify, Squarespace, etc., etc. Like there's loads of software for online shops if you want to sell produce direct. And then I think this leads us on to the question of, is it worth it? Which, yeah. Sue, do you want to say something about that?
Well, I mean, obviously you get more for your seeds. It's like anything, selling wholesale or selling. So you get more for your seeds. For you get more money per seed if you're selling direct. If you're packaging and selling through a retailer, you probably also get more money, but they will take a cut, probably between 30 and 50%. So that's got to affect the pricing of your packets. And you've got to bear in mind all the other things you've got to do. I would say probably cleaning the seed was a big one. All the packaging. It would depend a lot on how it fitted in with your workload, I think.
And there's a question in the chat which is related to this question of, is it worth it? Which is, do members of a seed co-op get the full price of direct retail sales? And the answer is effectively yes. So the whole point of the Wales Seed Hub is it's basically growers selling their seed direct. They're just doing it collectively. So there is a cut that has to go to the Wales Seed Hub because some costs we pay for centrally. So the cost of printing the seed packets, any cost associated with like taking card payments and admin fees and registration fees. So I think that what we agreed was, and we've had to make this financial system up as we've gone along, but what we've agreed so far is that like roughly 20% of the packet price goes back to the Seed Hub to cover the central costs. So then 80% of the packet price goes to the grower of that seed. So the idea is that the grower is going to get more money for their seed, but they're obviously putting in a lot more work. And then the idea of doing this as a cooperative is that we can actually share this work. So obviously we've just outlined loads of stuff that we have to do: packet printing, running an online shop, like registering, labeling. But because we did that collectively, we were able to share the work of that. And then theoretically, you know, the growers are almost getting the full retail price, apart from putting a small percentage to cover the costs. So we don't know if it's worth it. That's the answer. And listening to Dave saying about, you know, contract growing, there's a lot of benefits to that, because you don't have to do a lot of this stuff that we've just outlined when you're contract growing. You know, you grow the seed, you deliver it to a seed company, and they deal with a lot of that stuff. But then obviously you're getting less money for it. So pros and cons to both. Yeah. We've run to 5:05. Does anyone have any questions about direct selling?
I think there was one in the chat about.
Ooh, do you have to charge VAT on seeds? Well, we're not.
Well, I would hazard a guess. Do you have to charge VAT on flower seeds? Maybe it's the same as food. I mean,
I was thinking it might be the same as food, but I was just checking because I'm sort of VAT registered for things and like whether you need to do it.
A good question.
If you're not VAT registered, then you don't have to anyway. So
no, that's true.
I don't actually know the answer. We can find out.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Lisa, good question. I suppose you only get paid for what is sold, and with the Wales Seed Hub, that's true. So the Wales Seed Hub, the way we've set it up is we're or effectively selling direct just together. So if we don't sell our seed, yeah, we don't get paid for it because we're not selling it to a company that takes the risk. You know, I guess with Dave, you'll get paid for your seed anyway, Dave, and then it's up to Vital Seeds to sell it. But because we're working together to sell it ourselves, if we don't sell it, the grower doesn't get paid. So the grower only gets paid for what's sold. And the same with if it's not up to quality standard, like obviously we're not going to sell it if it's not up to quality standard or it doesn't pass germination tests. So therefore the grower doesn't get paid for it as well in that instance. Yeah, okay. Any final questions on seed selling, direct or contract? We've said a lot of things that you need to do to sell seed. I would just finish by saying don't feel overwhelmed because it is manageable. And like I said, we've done it as a collective. So we've worked through it step by step. And I'm going to be writing up a blog soon about all the steps that we had to do to register to be direct sellers. So I'll share that around when it's written and you can see it all written down as well. Yeah, go on. Question from Ali.
So if we've got some seed now that we've got, because it's the kind of time when we're all getting seed, and we want to direct sell, how do we go? What's our first steps? How do we go about it? How do we start?
Well, I think the answer is if you've got the seed now, you can't because you haven't gone through the most important thing is the crop record.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah, okay, understood.
And it's often quite tempting to, yeah, as a grower, be like, I've grown this really great seed, now I'd like to sell it. But what we found out in the Wales Seed Hub was there was all these issues of who owns the variety and is it ethical to sell it in the first place? And to be honest, what we found is we were growing a lot of real seeds varieties and then we were getting good seed crop from them and we're saying, oh yeah, let's sell this one. And then it was like, oh, but real seeds already sell this one. And we actually got the seed from them. And is it ethical if we start selling a variety that they've been working on for years and selecting and bulking out? So maybe we can't sell that one actually, even though we've had a good seed crop. So yeah, it's like all the forward planning. But if you do want to get into direct selling, then first step, yeah, planning which varieties, starting your crop records for them, but also registering with APHA because that takes a few months to get your license number. And planning packets in advance is quite important because you don't want to be rushing at the last minute in autumn to get seed packets and labels sorted.
Actually, Lisa's got a good point about the retail value of the crops that you had, Dave, because this is one of the things of the growers is whether it's more worthwhile to grow them as seed, to sell them as seed, or whether that it's more worthwhile to direct market them. And I mean, it just depends on the crop and the grower experience, I think, because if you're not near a market or you're not able to market it, then market something fresh, then you're more likely you possibly could market the seed if you're not near a fresh market. Actually, with the tomatoes that we've been growing for the Seed Hub from Cultivate this year, I have actually weighed all the tomatoes. I don't know whether you've done this, David, weighed all the tomatoes that we've taken seed from, so that we know that the retail value of what would have been a tomato crop. But also we've used the puree in the cafe as well after the seeds come out. So, you know, all is not lost.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. We haven't done that. We might do that next year. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite a good thing to do anyway, because tomatoes, different varieties of tomatoes have different numbers of seeds in them. You know, some 1 kilo of big beefsteak tomatoes will probably give you much less seed than a kilo of cherry tomatoes.
So there's a few more questions I'm just going to quickly address in the chat. One is, what is the process if people want to start selling with the Wales Seed Hub? And that's a good question, because now is a good time to join the Wales Seed Hub if you feel confident enough in your seed production skills and you feel like you're going to be producing seed that's going to be high enough quality to sell. And we have like a membership document. So because it's a cooperative, there's a membership document of what you would agree to if you join the hub, like what your responsibilities would be and what the hub's collective responsibilities would be. And then the process is you apply to the co-op and the co-op vote on whether you can join or not. And I'm pretty sure at the moment, Sue, that we are looking for new members. So now would be a good time to approach the Wales Seed Hub, because we'd be planning our crops for next year. So you can email me if you're interested in joining the Wales Seed Hub, and I can put you in touch with the whole co-op and the document that you need to know about joining. And then there's another question here about how do you go about approaching seed companies? And yeah, that's a good point, because in the past with the seed sovereignty program, we've tried to help like broker deals between potential contract growers and companies, but it's actually quite a delicate kind of human thing. And it's kind of like, I think it really depends on many things, like, are you close to the seed company? Do they, you know, what sort of site are they looking for? What sort of people do they want to work with? And in the past, we have connected people with real seeds. And like I said, they're not looking for contractors at the moment. Maybe Dave could say, like, how did you build that relationship with Vital Seeds?
Yes, so yeah, we knew Fred from a long time back. So we watched him through the whole process of starting up the company. And he's based not far away from us, so so it's the most local person, so we kind of went for it, and he was really open to it. I think one thing it might be worth saying is that with these seed companies, or at least from our experience, they don't want you to say to them, like, what would you like us to grow, just like a blank canvas, because that gives them nothing to really sink their teeth into. Whereas if you say, like, I really enjoy growing beetroot, I've had success with these varieties last year, would you like one of them or a different one? Then you can immediately starting to get into the sort of nitty gritty of what you're going to be growing. So yeah, perhaps before approaching a seed company, give some thought to what you might like to grow. And one thing that we've done a bit is if there's a crop that we are thinking of saving seed from, we'll save seed on a smaller scale, like for a season, just to see the crop through and see what it's like. So for example, this year we saved some yellow chard seed, just 6 plants, just to see the process through. So we're thinking next year we might offer a chard as well. But yeah, sort of being able to build from experience rather than just coming from like a point of just offering a blank canvas.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what we've learned is it's a long game with seed production, you know, and a seed company isn't going to really want to take someone on to grow a seed, like you said, unless you've kind of had some experience growing it already. So another best thing to do is to just keep producing seed and keep practicing, because as you get better at it and you've got a few more years of it under your belt, you can then go to a seed company and be like, I've grown this thing successfully for like 2 or 3 years, or, you know, here's a sample of some seed that I produced last year, and that's going to put you in a better position. I know Seed Co-op in the east of England have looked for contractors over the last few years as well, but I think that they are possibly dealing with, like, they want registered organic sites, but it'd be worth looking into that. And I think it's okay to approach a seed company as well and just talk to them and explain your situation and your seed saving experience.
I think the Seed Co-op have quite a useful document on their website for possible new growers. But yes, they do have to be registered organic or biodynamic.
There's a question about, would it be considered ethical if you have grown a real seed variety in a particular location and you've created a local adaptation? I think you mean, would it be ethical to sell that seed? That's a whole discussion, which I think we're going to have in the next session in depth, because there's no clear cut, like, what is ethical and what isn't ethical. It's a bit of a sliding scale. Like, on the one hand, you can kind of say nobody really owns seed, you know, it's a common thing and we all own it. And, you know, it's free for anyone to use. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you can say, well, but if we're talking about selling seed here and commercializing seed, like, is there an issue with who's already put work into that seed? And like, one thing we found with the Wales Seed Hub was we didn't really feel okay with just taking real seeds varieties, bulking them up and selling them, because we realized, like, not only do we have a good personal relationship with real seeds and we don't just want to replicate their catalog, but also, like, they have put years of work into kind of finding those varieties, bulking them out, selecting them, growing them to a good enough quality. So is it really ethical for us to then take them and sell them? And it's kind of, there's a whole debate around that, which I think we'll have more in the next session, and talk about like issues of, who owns varieties and what is okay to sell and what isn't, because that's a whole can of worms. I'm aware that we've run to 5:20 because we're having a good conversation. Is there any closing questions, burning questions that need to be answered?
I can answer Lisa's.
Go on.
I think the normal thought is 10 years.
And that's responding to how long does it take across?
Yeah, I think if you grow things separately for 10 years in one place and then another, on the whole, you can tell at the end of that they're different.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I think that was a really good discussion. Thanks so much, Dave, for joining us, and thanks, Sue. Thanks everyone. And next month, I'm going to send out information in advance. We're going to talk about seed justice and seed ethics, which is a really interesting discussion. So I'll see you all next month. Thanks, everyone.